Hey guys, it's me, your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 134 on the Pranzata Podcast. Before we get into it, I want to let the listeners know this might have been one of my favorite podcast episodes I've recorded so far on the Pranzata Podcast. I invite one of my friends over, my very good friend Matthew Koerner, and we have a political debate on a few things that we disagree with regarding this election in 2024. We have a very juicy conversation ranging from things from the events that occurred on January 6th with Donald Trump. We have a debate on free speech and the definition of free speech. We talk about Joe Rogan and the controversy that he got himself in 2020 with the COVID vaccines. We talk about Elon Musk and whether or not he cares about free speech and so much more. Before we get into the episode, though, I want to let the listeners know that unfortunately, there was a loose cable while recording this podcast episode, and at first, I thought that I completely lost the audio. Thankfully, after playing around with Ableton Live for a long time, I was able to get the audio to a clear enough place to put out the episode. The first 15-20 minutes of the episode are completely clear with no audio issues. Then for about an additional hour, you're going to hear a slight audio effect that sort of sounds like you're listening to an AM radio station. And then after that, unfortunately, I was not able to completely get rid of the crackling, but I did the best I absolutely could. I considered not even releasing this episode for these reasons, but I decided to put it up just because I loved this conversation so much, so I wanted it up as a reference for myself. And I figured for anybody listening who's really into the conversation, you can pretty much hear everything clearly for the first hour. Also, good news, going forward, I am going to have video back, as you can see right now, so this will never be an issue again. The reason I had been having audio issues in the first place is that I was recording from a laptop that was on its last leg and it was dying. Starting the next episode, this will never be an issue again because God forbid there's a loose cable with the audio. There's always going to be the raw audio from the video as a backup just in case. So without further ado, here is episode number 134. Enjoy. Okay, so let's get right into it. So to explain the listeners again, I had released a podcast episode. I believe it was 130, 131, something around there if the listeners care to hear that one. So to reiterate for the listeners just hearing about it for the first time, this year I've been more confused than ever about the political landscape. I'm not necessarily claiming any one particular political space. I said this on my last episode. My current status would be considered politically agnostic. Like I'm just like, I want to remove myself from the situation. Prior to that, I was pretty dead set on voting for the left my entire life. But this year I'm walking out a lot of confusions I'm going with in my brain. During that episode, I had kind of talked out publicly some of my confusions, and I gave a full list of pros and cons of why I would vote for the left versus cons, and why I would vote for the right versus cons. The one particular element in which Matthew Koerner wanted to challenge me on this episode was when I said that one of my downsides to potentially voting for the left is that I don't think that the left has as much passion as free speech as the right. So would you care to take the conversation over from here? So can you explain your why you want to challenge me on this?
Absolutely. I'd like to first off say that Andrea and I have been friends for many years now at this point. I respect you deeply. And so my first thought was, oh my gosh, wow. I disagree with that at every fiber of my being. But then I think, and I hope this isn't wrong to say, well, when we texted, we had an initial conversation about this, and I think we were just maybe missing each other a little bit with the way we were phrasing it, to which I think this is extremely good that we're having this conversation in the public forum, because I think a lot of people there's all these buzzwords and dog whistles that people, like, I think at our core, our values, I know are pretty much, we have the same values.
And that's, I don't want to interrupt you. I really do want to become a better listener, but I do want to make a couple things clear. One, my point of criticizing the left isn't to say fuck the left. I actually personally want to steer away from that kind of language, period. I think personally I'm getting tired of the left hating the right and the right hating the left.
I think what we're experiencing right now is a very common experience where you hear somebody's opinion online and you say, fuck this person. And then when you really think about it, you're like, oh, actually, we have a lot in common. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't fridge assholes on both sides. I believe there's fucking psycho leftists and fucking like crazy redneck conservatives. I believe that's true. But I would say the majority of the population are people like you and me that we just happen to fall into different beliefs. I also want to make clear, because I didn't make this clear on that podcast, when I said that I believed the right was more in favor of free speech, I want to clarify that I don't think Donald Trump personally gives a shit about free speech. That's not what I'm saying. I don't think he cares either way. I think he's going to bring that up in his points to win a vote. I don't necessarily think he's a good person, but I do think that the people backing up the entire party of the right seem to, by appearance, or at least the followers, the people who want to vote for the right, care for that issue more. But anyways, I wanted to make all that clear. So carry on with what your criticisms are and your explanation of things.
Absolutely. So I think what I'm trying to say is we're going to have this conversation now about the freedom of speech topic, or deplatforming, as we came to discuss. But I would also like to move forward to the discussion of really the terms. I think semiotics might be the right word, but I have to look that up. But the language that we use, I want to discuss like language with you essentially, because I agree that most people are working people. Most people work for a living. And if you're a worker, and to say you're a worker, I mean, if you can generally, let's just say you earn less than $170,000 a year, which is a pretty wide swath of the American public.
Yeah.
That's like 90%, I would think. For the last time I looked it up. So I think you do slightly more of the American people work for a living. You typically have the same values, okay? When it comes to labor, at least, which is probably one of my biggest things I care about, and the way that services are rendered and treated, you have the same moral priorities. We're all getting screwed by our health insurance companies. But the way that certain interests and really our two-party system twists our vernacular, our language, it pits us against each other in this way. And it was, again, we're very close and we talk every day.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we're essentially saying the same thing right now. Yeah.
But I don't want to mince words when I heard that episode, the only reason I texted you was it was heartbreaking to hear someone who I know has your values say that, because, and again, we talked about this, it's okay. But I was like, oh my goodness.
Okay, so without getting too far off track, explain to me why you think it's not correct to say free speech.
Okay, so, and that wasn't the heartbreaking. Okay, the heartbreaking part was, okay, so I don't think freedom of speech, what I interpreted you talking about, okay? I will not put words in your mouth.
Okay.
What I interpreted you were saying was that freedom of speech, as it is referred to in the Bill of Rights, our Constitution, the First Amendment, which gives us, among freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition, RAPS, if you will, religion, assembly, press, petition, and then ultimately speech. Now, that freedom of speech protects us from speaking out against the government, to which I think the left, of which I consider myself on the far left, and have been my entire life, really. I consider myself a very strong defender and proponent of freedom of speech, but I do think that there are limits upon that freedom of speech to have which I think everyone does, again, to have a healthy functioning society. The one that classic one we always go to is you cannot shout fire in a crowded movie theater. You cannot shout, kids, get in trouble if they shout rape in a shopping. There's just certain things that are harmful, because if some people go, what's going on? Or, there's certain things that should not, again, fire in a movie theater is really the big one. You can cause a panic or commotion, or you cannot maybe say, hang Mike Pence, take our country back outside the Capitol when there's people with pitchforks.
Yeah.
And that's why we move the conversation more towards deplatforming, because there is this thing, and I see it on center-right and right-wing spaces where people say, oh, when Jack Dorsey kicked Trump off of Twitter, the former CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, that was wrong because it went against freedom of speech, to which I say, now the nerd in me says, well, that's not freedom of speech.
Okay.
That's the freedom of speech only protects you against the government. Twitter is a private company. They can do whatever they want. But then you and I discussed, well, should they be able to? And that's where I'm happy to have the conversation. I'm happy to have any conversation with you. But should Twitter be able to do that? I think because Donald Trump, just picking on him, incited an insurrection. And I made sure to watch the footage of it again yesterday, and it's frightening. We came so close to losing our country on that day. When I saw the people, like, I was watching the news that whole day, January 6th, 2021, I guess, 2021, January 6th. Okay. I watched the news all day. I was just glued to my screen. I could not believe what I was seeing. I mean, you have senators running for their life. You have, if people get lost in, like, the theatrics of it. You have the idiot who had the funny, fuzzy helmet with the horns. You have the people face painting. The average person there was what I've read about. People call them Al-Qaeda or something. Just your average, like, dumb people who were just there for the meme of it. But then there were the paramilitary groups who were searching for Nancy Pelosi with zip ties, wearing bulletproof vests and helmets. Those are the people I'm scared of. If there was more organization, they basically had the sitting president at the time's backing. He was trying to prevent the vote that would swear in the future president, and a heavily armed actually, but disorganized militia group went in and took force, and several of those Capitol soldiers died within that day and a few days later. Part of them, a lot of the Capitol Police Force, they're used to people taking tours. They're used to very low. They're not used to having a war basically fought in front of them. My heart goes out to all of them. That was just, like, again, when I was watching those videos yesterday. So Donald Trump, in the same way that you cannot say, and I think the most damning, the most horrific use of abuse of freedom of speech I've ever seen would have been during the Rwandan genocide in 1994, when the person on the radio, I forget the name of the radio station right now, said the signal, "cut down the tall trees," which was the term that started the Rwandan genocide, where I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I think it's something like 80. I won't say 80 numbers because they might be wrong, but the gravity of the situation is that a genocide occurred, and it was, I think, 1 million people were murdered within the next 6 months because he had their airspace and was able to abuse it. I do not think that Donald Trump, I don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt for anything, especially not a guy who's been impeached twice. So him being kicked off Twitter, sure. Are these platforms too powerful? Absolutely. Yes. I have kind of filibustered here, so I'm going to yield.
Okay, so I have there was a lot there, so there's a lot coming up for me. Okay, so a specific example I could give, not one that I'm incredibly passionate about, but a more concrete example is Mark Zuckerberg. He openly confessed, I don't know if it was this year or within the past few months, but he openly confessed that he was pushed by the government, by people in the White House, to not show videos discussing COVID vaccines. Now, this is no secret or conspiracy because Biden openly admitted to it. He admitted it to everybody.
Yes.
So now if you want to give extreme examples, genocide, of course, that's like, I don't want anybody to create a genocide. Okay, but the definitions become a little more murky because for me, I think it's a little bit extreme to say zero conversations about the COVID vaccine. Now, this is where I became passionate about it because I was a big Joe Rogan fan. Yeah. And I saw a major attempt to take him down from Spotify, which I did not agree with whatsoever. And I don't know if you watched my last podcast episode, but if you did, it explains a lot of what I was talking about, or a lot of what I'm talking about now.
I watched all your podcasts during the time of the Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I don't know if I saw you. When did it?
A couple days ago. So I'll explain. I was going to say, but the listeners should know anyways. So I had been a Joe Rogan fan years before he became he's not even a political figure. He just became controversial in the field of politics because of COVID. So to kind of, because I don't want to get sidetracked, I want to stay on topic, but to kind of explain what happened there, he was always a very liberal guy. I don't want to say he endorsed Bernie Sanders, but he publicly announced.
He said he did.
Did he endorse him?
He endorsed Bernie Sanders.
He endorsed Bernie Sanders. Okay. He
voted for
he was like very anti like student loan debt. He really had a lot of compassion for people with student loan debt. I think maybe one of the only conservative sides he was with guns, because he's a tough guy. He wants guns. But besides that, he was incredibly passionate, incredibly sweet. This was somebody I had listened to for a long time. I knew he was a good person. I knew his heart was in the right place. Now, we can say that maybe a comedian shouldn't be taking on such major topics. That's a debate we can have. But at the very least, what he offered to the table was, these are not businessmen in suits on CNN and Fox. These are real people having conversations. And he invited people from the entire political spectrum. Now, when he started bringing up topics about the COVID vaccines, also just to clarify to the listeners, because a lot of people, again, if they don't do their own research on this, they just assume he was an anti-vaxxer because he got the name anti-vaxxer slammed against him. What his saga is with vaccines, he was always pro-vaccines. What happened was the day he went to go get his vaccine shot, he was planning to get his vaccine shot. It was the Johnson & Johnson shot. It got removed from the shelf that day. It freaked him the fuck out. Naturally, who the fuck wouldn't think that? And he was like, hold on, I don't want to make a mistake. Let me have doctors from all different spectrums of this issue on my podcast to discuss the potential side effects of taking a vaccine. And furthermore, let's discuss how could this impact children. Totally valid things. I don't think there's any reason to censor any of this. Now, meanwhile, there was a major attempt to take him down. And when that failed to happen because Spotify said no, then all of a sudden, out of the blue, people were making race videos, like race compilations of him saying racial slurs like 10 years ago and trying to frame it as if that was the past 4 years. I had been listening to his podcast for years. I had never heard him say any racial terms. And so many people of African descent stepped up and they were like, this guy helped me out gave me money, helped me out. Just like really a solid, good guy. And I can even attest to this. I used to work at a gig in New York City where I would play piano as an opener for stand-up comedians. And I actually had the privilege of meeting a stand-up comedian who went on tour with him. And I asked him, I said, tell me the truth, like, how is Joe Rogan in real life? His response was, I can't say I agree with him talking about COVID, but I can tell you he's one of the kindest people I've ever met. And exactly what you see on his podcast is exactly who he is. So this is a good person trying to do good things. And then you have this major attempt to remove him from a platform. Now, that's where I'm not saying Donald Trump is this amazing person whatsoever.
I think his supporters agree he's an ass.
Even the people who are voting, most of the people voting for the right don't even like him. They're just doing it because they agree with some of the issues. And if I were to vote for the right, that would be my case too. I don't like Donald Trump, but I do care about Joe Rogan. And I felt like the vicious attempt to take him down from a platform, that really got me thinking. And that's why I said in my podcast, I agree with a lot of the left's points, but I think that was a big mistake. I do not think, because there's nothing that can convince me having a discussion with multiple doctors about what are the potential side effects of COVID is killing anybody. It wasn't illegal to take a vaccine. Everyone was going to make their decision no matter what, and everyone wanted information. If anything, trying to take him down probably pushed people to not take the vaccine because it probably scared people into thinking, what are they covering? You know what I mean? So
I know what you're saying.
That's where that's it. That's all I have to say. That's where I started to have more passion about censorship, because to me, there was nothing that should have censored Joe Rogan. I mean, I guess they didn't essentially, but if we go back to the Mark Zuckerberg example, they did want to censor him and videos that he was putting, not him personally, but videos that were going on his business on YouTube, etc. So anyways, if you want to follow up with anything on that.
Yeah, I'd like to start off by talking about the Twitter thing. Then I'll Joe Rogan, since that's the one you go strong with. I just want to point out something that Elon Musk, is a great defender of free speech, is actively all the time removing things that criticize him from his website, Twitter. He is the most transactional clown. Anyway, he is not a defender of free speech. He takes things down that he disagrees with. If anyone says, oh, don't buy a Tesla, they suck, that's gone. Like, he is 100%.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's fair.
Free speech.
If that's true, then that's a fair point. I just don't know that much about him personally. All I'll say about him, I'll let you finish. The only thing I will say about him is that I've watched him in interviews and I never thought he came across as an asshole. He always seemed sweet. But again, I don't know much about him. I was never passionate about him in any particular way to do research on him.
Elon's a tricky guy. But we're not even talking about Elon. Let's talk about, so Mark Zuckerberg is this one, the Facebook.
Okay.
I would say the Mark Zuckerberg and the Joe Rogan are the same thing. And I don't know how much I hate Spotify. So I think that, as most musicians do, they underpay us horrifically.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening, yes. Do I use Spotify? Yeah. Do I pay them money? Heck no.
Yeah.
Like, I do not give them $1. So the whole Joe Rogan thing, I saw that when all my favorite artists like Neil Young were leaving the platform, I was like, this could be a thing that breaks Spotify. I was rooting for it. I thought Spotify was going to go down, and I was so happy about that, because I think we should have a public Spotify personally, and we should have, but that's another discussion.
Okay.
I think that if Spotify, whatever, they don't treat their creators well.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a separate issue. I don't know why I felt the need to voice that, but I did. Now with the Mark Zuckerberg thing, that's the same issue as the Joe Rogan thing, and that's what I said. So during the Joe Rogan thing, I wasn't really sure. Do you take him down? Do you not? After hearing you say everything you just did, I'm starting to wonder, they probably should have taken him down, because there is no disagreement. There is virtually zero disagreement in the scientific community about the efficacy of vaccines and the COVID vaccines. And there has not been any disagreement amongst, I think, 99.9% of scientists and doctors and medical professionals with advanced degrees in the field since its inception. So the fact that, it goes back to my whole thing with the fire in a movie theater, and it doesn't just happen fires. Again, there's a million examples. That's just the one that's easiest to describe. So Mark Zuckerberg was told by the government, from what you told me just now, if he was told by the government, take these things down, it's because we were in the middle of a very deadly pandemic, and people, for various reasons, be they political or otherwise harmful, were trying to make the issue murky. They were trying to say, oh, well, the scientific community is not in agreement about it, when it was. It very much
Wait,
is.
so
all doctors agree you should get vaccines.
So what about the doctors on his podcast? They were doctors. They were. Do you want me to read their qualifications? Like the people he had on?
You can find any asshole. You can find
that's where we disagree. That's where
people to say anything. You can find very, very intelligent people, but you're not going to find thousands of doctors that say don't do that. You're going to find dozens. But there are millions of doctors in this country alone who all agree. And a million being 1,000,000. Like, the numbers are...
Or perhaps the ones that don't agree are being censored. That's the other issue as well.
I would see the burden of proof falls on the other people, though, to say that.
But think about it. If they're attempting to censor these doctors, which they failed to do so on Spotify specifically, but they were successfully doing so on YouTube, because that's what Mark Zuckerberg said. He said, hey, people were putting COVID videos on YouTube. I was asked to take them down. The government admitted to it. It's no secret.
We're in the middle of the pandemic. There was a timeliness. It got so much worse in this country than other countries because of this. Because of this disagreement, I feel like you created a false equivalency. The overwhelming, these things are also, there's medical papers. The antigens. There's so many things that people could read to see, oh, cool. And also it's a vaccine like all the other vaccines have been. They all work the same. You
don't think there's ever been a vaccine that had negative side effects in all of history?
You mean like a single individual vaccine, or even no, there's the Tuskegee things. There's all kinds of bad vaccines, but
don't you think if
on the whole are very good?
Don't you think if a vaccine just comes out, the public deserves to have some type of discussion about what are potential side effects?
I don't know, because the public, I don't know about that. Discussion.
Okay. So if there was a town hall, and people, again, we're talking about censorship and freedom of speech. If there was a town hall, and that's kind of going back, this is getting off track, but that's kind of my argument as to why I think censorship is incorrect, because I think the way the tides are turning with technology, in some strange way, these big platforms are the quote unquote town hall, because nobody's meeting up in person anymore. But anyways, that's besides the point. If there was a town hall and a doctor showed up at the town hall and said, I have some other evidence, you would say, get him out?
Well, this town exists within a state, which exists within a country, right?
Yeah.
So if some random doctor runs into a Boundbrook town hall and says, this thing is a sham, but I have knowledge that pretty much every other doctor in the world doesn't think so, I don't know if I'd say, get out of here, but I might listen to what he had to say.
But that's not my point. My point is, why would we just take him off? It doesn't...
Well, there's a timely issue. So how many people do you know that died from COVID? A bunch, I bet.
I don't know a single one.
Really? None of your friends' parents died from COVID?
No. I don't know a single person.
A bunch of my friends'
I don't know
parents
anybody.
died of COVID.
Yeah.
The ones who didn't get vaccinated. Like, yeah, I knew, God, so many people died.
I mean, I'm not lying. I don't know a single person who died of COVID, but that's just my difference and your difference.
Yeah, wild. Well, okay, but you know a lot of people
I've heard
practice die.
I've heard stories, but I've never personally witnessed a single death of COVID in my life. Not a friend, not a friend's family, nothing.
Amazing. Well, I mean, our area was particularly hit bad because you know, growing up outside New York City, like it was just it's the most densely populated state. Those early days, so many people. I mean, a lot of famous people you at least know, famous people who died, like Adam Schlesinger, Fountains of Wayne. Like, there's so many people. Well, anyways, there's a time issue. There's a time thing. If someone, let's say the fire. Okay, so the movie here's on fire. If someone says fire, and then someone else says there's no fire, and there's very clearly a fire right there, and someone says no, get out of here, and everyone's like okay, but then the other guy says no, stop. Where is no fire? Everything is fine. Keep sitting and watching the movie. You can't have, there's no time to have that discussion while the flames are literally engulfing you. And I believe it was the opinion of the medical community and the United States government that there was no, that we were in an active crisis, that we were trying to, I mean, there's the papers I read at the time, and in other countries, look at countries that fared so much better. If we had just gotten it a little bit under control, really, if we'd done the lockdown like 2 weeks earlier, it would have been a fraction of the deaths and the spreads, and the whole thing would have been over much quicker. But we didn't.
But here's the thing.
It's not real.
And that's the thing. Joe Rogan never said it wasn't real. He was just talking
about Joe Rogan.
Or just people, or the people who agree with him.
Joe Rogan was doing was, okay, so we're in the movie theater is burning down. One guy says fire. People start walking towards the exits. Another guy says, there's no fire. Sit back down in your seats. The public is too stupid, I guess, in this theater to notice the flames or smell the smoke. And what Joe Rogan did is say, whoa, let's listen to both of them. But there's an active fire in the movie theater.
Okay. That's fair. If you see it that way, that's fair. But however, I still have a further point to make about that. Why, if that's what people believe, why not just censor those episodes? People want to remove him as his career. To me, you have to be a real monster to not see that he's a good person and he was just doing what he thought was right. If you want to say, hey, censor those specific episodes, take them down, the government said so because we have an active fire, that's an argument that we can have. But if you want to say destroy his career, that's like, to me, that's insane.
I mean, he's a comedian. At the end of the day, he's a comedian.
Yeah.
He's what, the meanest, to be fair, like the meanest thing I've ever seen written about Joe Rogan was that he's what Hitler would refer to as a useful idiot. He's the guy who's, I just like this metaphor. He's the guy who stands up and says, no. I don't know if there's smoke. Let's just wait and listen to them both. Because it gives what he does, because he's so talented, he is so charismatic. And I don't necessarily think he's an idiot. I don't think he's that. But like, he is useful to people who want to amplify a message of, in this case, distrust in intellectualism. And people don't know how dumb they are. That's, I guess, one of the saddest things, one of the worst things is people who are crazy don't know they're crazy. People who are stupid don't know they're stupid. There's the 4 levels of knowledge, right? There's unconscious unknowing, which is you've never heard of it. You don't know anything about it. You don't know how to do it. Okay. And then there's conscious unknowing, which is like, I don't speak Swahili. I know I don't speak Swahili. Yeah. But I know that there's something. Then there's conscious knowing, which is like right now, I speak Spanish, but I have to really think about the words, but I'm conscious I know it. Then there's unconscious unknowing. I speak English, but I don't think about speaking English. I'm just communicating.
Yeah.
What I bring that up to say most people are in the unconscious unknowing. They don't know that they don't know certain things. So if you say to them, like the earth is flat thing, that's a crazy one, but we'll stick with vaccines. Most people don't know anything about biology. They don't understand. It's a shame. It's a real shame about our public schooling, but that's deliberate because a dumb public is easier to control. So that's why Reagan cut the education spending a lot in the 1980s. And now we're seeing the results of it. It's people who did poorly in their biology class, still got a high school diploma, are out there thinking that they know as much as a doctor. I mean, there's that funny meme I saw where it's like people doing vaccine research and it's a picture of scientists in the lab, people doing anti-vaccine research and it's people on the toilet scrolling through Facebook, because that's what it is. Most people are not doing these tests. They're reading shit other people said. They're like, I don't know. I'm a big believer in science and listening to people. Listening to the other thing, it goes with my democratic values. If the vast majority of people, the vast majority of scientists are in agreement about something, whether it's global warming or vaccines, I will defer to their knowledge because I am not a scientist.
You don't think there's, and I'm not saying this in a conspiratorial kind of way, but you think there's zero possibility that there could be bias in the scientific community?
I think that there are biases in every person. Yes. I think every person comes into life with biases. No, I think what you're implying, and please, I'll stop in a second, correct me if I'm wrong. Are you saying that there's a manufactured bias that's put forth by some other group, a shadowy group or something? Because
No.
I don't believe that.
I'm saying that
I'm a pretty conspiratorial guy. I think I think the government is not, I think the idea of government is a beautiful thing. I think our actual government is a very green, malicious.
I'm saying that, do you believe that there's people in the world with lots of money, and because they have lots of money, they control the power because they put their money in places that then, because they have that money, they put it in this place. Now the power is here.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's... Can you explain that again, what you're saying?
Okay, so let me be more concrete. Be more concrete. So scientists aren't just loaded with money. People, in order for them to conduct scientific research, and I know this from the I explained this on my last podcast too, but you didn't see it. I know this from nutrition because I love looking up nutritional stuff.
Oh, yeah,
okay. So, for example, there's this one doctor I listen to, and he's a qualified doctor. He explained that be careful what you listen to when you're reading nutritional studies or videos portraying nutritional studies. He said because, and now this has nothing to do with vaccines. This just has to do with calories. I mean, there's no conspiracy, here. He's just like, scientists don't necessarily have a lot of money. So people with a lot of money might have a particular agenda to invest in certain studies versus the others. So for example, let's say a scientist wanted to do a study that said, is Coca-Cola bad for you? But they need money to conduct this study.
Yes.
Somebody who has a lot of money in Coca-Cola stock is not going to invest in that study.
Yes.
So bias exists amongst, I don't know if bias is the correct term, but corruption. Corruption exists within the scientific community in regards to nutrition. So if that's true, why couldn't it potentially exist within medicine as well?
No, there are all sorts of biases, but okay, if we're going to step back to this was the scientific community on a global level.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists, not just in the United States. So you want to say the United States government was saying, oh, you have to push it? No. Scientists across the entire world are in agreement that, these vaccines in general are good and helpful. And these vaccines in particular will help stop the spread, lessen the death rate of COVID-19. So we can move to either eradication, like in the case of polio, or endemic, like in the case of influenza, which is where we ultimately landed with COVID. COVID will not kill you unless you are already sick. Whereas when it first came out, it was taking down lots of healthy people. In addition to adding had a comorbidity. I do not see the burden of proof would be on the person to show me, okay, what is that bias? Well, I don't have any. No, because scientists are not they're not in harmony like that. It's in the same way that every scientist looks out there and knows that the world is round because of all the ways in which it's round. There's the horizon that disappears. There's the orbits of the sun, orbiting the sun. There's which we know from the shadows and the way it's cast, the way that we have communication with people on the other side of the planet when it's dark, the moon, the way that the moon glows out. There's a million, the way that the poles, the magnetic fields of the poles indicate that we have a round planet. In all those, there are scientific tests and studies which are, here's the other thing, it's not like one person, because, and this is what I'm saying, people don't know any better. Like, I do not know much about biology. So but I know enough to know I don't. Like, I am aware, I am the conscious unknowing, which more people need to be in to understand that, okay, scientific communities do not just listen to one head scientist. The first guy who said, hey, here's the vaccine, everyone in the world take this. That's not what happened. He said, hey, I have this. Now, every scientist, please, in different countries, in every country in the world that was industrialized, and even then the ones that were not, please replicate this. Tell me if I'm wrong. So it was put to the test by, and this is not an understatement, millions of scientists, hundreds of thousands to millions of scientists and I'm counting doctors and scientists at this point. So yes, and pharmaceutical experts were all in agreement that, oh no, when we replicate these studies, we are finding the same thing. This can help fight the COVID vaccine. The reason the COVID vaccine happened so fast this time was, one, we haven't had a global pandemic like this in 100 years. We have computers now. We can do so much more. Two, the whole world basically stopped because so many people were dying that every other sector in the economy realized, no, we have to put all efforts on this. Every single thing in the scientific community and the pharmaceutical community, the pharmaceutical community, there's a community, the pharmaceutical industry, which is nefarious and does a lot of shady things. But I know why they do those shady things. It's to make money. Every other industry basically said, no, you are going to eat this one so we can get back to work, which is why the vaccines were free. And the government, which basically the answer is why did it come out so fast? Because it had to. We pumped so much money and resources, more than has ever been done for anything else. That's probably a sad thing too. But in 100 years, 20 years, when there's no longer political, people look back and realize, whoa, this is the greatest mobilization effort since the Second World War. It's incredible that we did this.
Okay, everything you're saying is valid. There's nothing you're saying that I greatly disagree with. But what I'm saying is, because it came out so fast, and because the Johnson & Johnson was literally taken off the shelf for a reason, the public deserves the right to discuss their fears around the vaccine. And that's where I think it was a mistake to try to censor that, because if anything, it actually made the case worse. Because when you start censoring those conversations, people go, why are they censoring it? What's the conspiracy? If anything, it pushed it in the end. Not to mention, you had this like shaming, like this public shaming of like, he's an anti-vaxxer, witch, burn him, witch, anti-vaxxer. Again, totally unproductive. If somebody comes and says, whoa, that vaccine just got pulled off from the shelf, I'm scared. Should I give this? I'm terrified. Like, is the next one going to be ready, or is that going to be pulled off the shelf too? What's happening? There's no reason to censor those conversations, in my opinion, because like maybe a year later, sure, like it's been a year, enough time is put in, the data is there. But within such a quick time frame, people's fears should not be shamed. People's fears should not be. That's where we disagree. I'm not disagreeing with anything you actually said. I agree with everything you said. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. But I just don't think it was a smart move to try to censor conversations around people's anxieties around it.
Are all anxieties and fears valid?
I mean, if a vaccine was removed from the shelf, that's a pretty valid anxiety. Okay,
well, I know you don't eat McDonald's, but you don't think, but a lot of people eat McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you have friends and loved ones who eat McDonald's, I'm going to assume.
Rarely.
You know people who eat McDonald's.
Yeah.
Have you ever had McDonald's?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, yeah, me too. I'm a vegan. I haven't eaten McDonald's for like a long time now. But like, that McDonald's every now and then will have to pull burgers from their shelves, if you will, because there's mad cow in it.
Yeah.
Or like Target will have to pull a product because there's lead in it or something.
Yeah.
Bad batches happen. But that doesn't mean that, look, I'm not a burger eater, so it's a silly example, but it doesn't mean that every McDonald's burger is ultra poisonous.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying vaccines are all poisonous because of this. I'm saying that... I'm sorry, go on. I'm saying that because everything happened so fast and the public was afraid of this Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and what does that mean for the new vaccines? Is everything safe? Is everything okay? I think it's a valid concern. And I don't think censoring those concerns is productive, really. If anything, it pushes people in the exact opposite direction.
But if those concerns are amplified, what if the theater burns down while there's people inside it? But we're discussing whether or not we should leave the theater while it's on fire.
Okay,
I'm
so
saying there's a timely issue where the government, I think it's the opposite. I think a year after the fact, if it's under control, sure, debate it, talk about it all you want. But like, if it's over it. But it's like, okay, we have to make it. I think the government probably, was it clumsy the way they did it? Horrifically clumsy.
Yeah.
I think that they caused so much, what you're saying, I want to speak to that. You're absolutely right. They fomented so much conspiratorial BS because but what I'm saying is people don't actually know better. They just have this inkling. Now, why this happened? We can talk about that. Because why don't people trust the government? Because the government has been untrustworthy. That's absolutely a thing.
Yeah.
Why is the government untrustworthy? Because they cut education funding. Because they sent us to war, to die in wars that were for profit. Like, no, there was no reason to go to Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Iraq again. None of that made anyone any better in this country. There's so many things that the government has done. They enslaved all those people, there's so many people. They moved Native American. Like, the government has done some horrific things over our 200 years. And that's true of many other governments across the world. I get people not trusting their government. It's on the government to be trustworthy. The government has that's the onus is on the government. I'm with you. Like, the government has to be like, hey, we're going to give you free college. We're going to give you a public school system that prepares you for the world. We're going to give you, we're going to foment the brightest minds that we can.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure that if your house is burning down, we're going to have best firefighters go there. Like, the government is supposed to protect ourselves and do that, not enrich billionaires, which is what it does. So yeah, it's the boy who cried wolf. If the government does a lot of bad things, the government also does a lot of amazing things. But because certain voices that should not be amplified. I mean, the fact that I keep using the flat earth thing because there's so many people who are otherwise intelligent that actually think we have them.
Yeah, but let's not pretend flat earth and being afraid of a new vaccine is the same thing, because it's not. It's absolutely not. I mean, like, if you've ever flown in a plane, you could literally like see the curvature of the earth. But
you can see it.
But if there's evidence that somebody that a vaccine was taken off the shelf, that's absolutely not a fair.
You had vaccines all life, though, right? Like, you must.
I mean, I must have. I don't know.
School system like I did. So you had your smallpox vaccine.
Yeah.
You had you went to college. You had a meningitis vaccine.
Yeah.
I know that you've had vaccines your entire life because I have. Because everyone has.
Yeah.
In this society. We're fine. We're actually better than fine. We don't have polio. We don't have smallpox. We don't have
right. But I'm pretty sure those vaccines had been tried and tested and true by that point. That my parents felt safe enough for me to get those vaccines.
They were tried before they got to us. They tried the COVID vaccine on so many people and it's messed up to say it, but yeah, in the global south, third world, whatever you want to call it. They tested it. They worked out the kinks. By the time it got to the US, those vaccines were tried and true. They're never going to test something on us like that. It's just not going to be a thing. It's messed up, but they are going to try that on other people, and they did, and that's documented, well documented. They also, again, it's not like one company and one person is shipping out, oh, you all need to take this vaccine. It was every scientist in the world was reproducing. Like, the vaccines that you and I had, those are made by our local, they're hooked up in our local municipalities, and are certain vaccines or administration of vaccines going to be messed up? Yes, but that is going to be human error. It's not going to be a conspiracy to give us off.
No, and that's the other thing. I think a lot of people who have questions, we're past it at this point. A lot of people who had questions about the vaccine and the newness of it automatically got lumped in this conspiracy theory mindset, when in fact it was just valid questions,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And that's why I say, I think the way that, and I don't want to say it's the left, but it was primarily people on the left who were passionate about this issue. I mean, yourself included.
Yeah.
Primarily the people on the left. I think they made a colossal error by making such a shameful as in shaming these people. I think the correct way to have handled that would have been like, I understand you're compassionate. A compassionate way to handle that would be like, I understand you're afraid. However, listen to me. And
when I did text you, maybe this will jog it. I thought that you were talking about like comedians getting canceled.
No, I had
before.
You said something about Dave Chappelle, and like, here's the thing: I
was like, okay, and you were like, you don't care either. So I was like,
I'm gonna be a total asshole, and everyone's gonna hate me for saying this. I actually don't listen to his stand up. I loved the Dave Chappelle, the Chappelle show.
Mm-hmm.
I was literally depressed when it was over. I've never been a fan of his stand-up style. So like the trans jokes, I couldn't even tell you anything about it because it's not that I don't think he's a good comedian and people are going to eat me apart. This is going to be the most controversial part of this podcast. But me saying that I don't like Dave Chappelle's comedy. It's not that I don't think he's a talented comedian. It's just something about his delivery doesn't do it for me. He's very he's not as animated as the comedians I prefer. He's almost like, it's like he's having a real conversation versus putting on a show, which is a very skilled thing to do. And I only like it from certain people. Like I like it from Louis C.K. Louis C.K. is very much like you feel like you're talking to him. For some reason, when Dave Chappelle does it, it's not my preferred style. So because of that, I couldn't even tell you anything about it. But anyways, so that was just a long-winded way to say that the censorship thing had nothing to do with stand-up comedy. It had everything to do with the Joe Rogan incident. And at the very least, I just want to say this, even if there's a very good argument to say that his voice should not be amplified in this time because of the urgency, maybe a year later we can talk about it, but now's not the time. At the very least, there should not have been an attempt to take down his entire career. That's just, to me, that's fucking ridiculous. If anything, I mean, I think that's evil.
I don't think Joe Rogan's voice was the one that doesn't need amplification.
Yeah.
Saying that he should not have people who are trying to sow panic and discord on his podcast.
Yeah.
Are going to broadcast a message of either hate or confusion to millions of people. I don't think Joe Rogan himself was a bad force.
No, but what I'm saying is not you personally, but whatever this force trying to take him down, it was primarily people from the left. So that's where I had beef with the left because.
Well, he did say the N-word a bunch. I mean, like, I don't think he's a racist person. I'm with, like, I don't, but I look, he himself said, like, he saw that video, it looks bad. Like,
but
there was honestly that just came out.
Joe Rogan has like 3,000 or 4,000. I mean, I might be.
I don't want to talk about Joe Rogan. I mean, we're not in a disagreement about this.
Well, we kind of were because you just said that. You just made the point about.
I'm saying that, like, I get what, like, you start with the one thing, and then other people are like, well, okay, it starts off with, well, he has this anti-vaxxer on. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. He did also say the N-word like 20 times. Wait a minute. He did also have Jordan Peterson on. Oh, doesn't he have all these other Nazis on? What is he doing? He's too irresponsible. Like, I think the most mature thing to say would be maybe he's too irresponsible to have that platform. I could say that maybe. But, like, I could probably believe that, actually. Yeah, he probably is too irresponsible to speak to millions, to let millions of, he should probably have a bit more of, like, or at least at that time, he probably should have been like, you know what? Maybe some of these people should not be or I should put a disclaimer like, hey, or should hit them harder and be like, hey, I disagree with that. Because I've seen him do that very well.
Yeah.
Like Candace Owens, he absolutely.
Oh yeah, he ate her up about the
being racist, basically.
No, global warming. She was
that was, yeah, he could have hit a few other people that hard. He does it all the time. He's great at what he does. And again, I love a lot of the episodes, well, most of the episodes I've heard, he's still phenomenal. And I like the best episodes are obviously where he's got like David Tell or like where he's just chilling with his friends.
Also, I don't agree with the idea that he's too irresponsible because here's the thing. He relates to the general public as the person asking the questions. He's not the one making like he's saying, okay, let me have Candace Owens on and see what she has to say. I don't agree with the statement you said about people thinking that Jordan Peterson doesn't deserve a platform. I think he's a brilliant person. Like, I think, he might say stuff that you don't agree with about some political issues, but I think as far as his philosophies go, like psychology, philosophy and stuff like that goes, I think he's a great speaker.
I think that, but you don't like his politics either.
But do I have to? Like, to me, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
No, if I
can sit
Peterson on and talk about psychology, great, do that. That's fine. But just because but if Jordan Peterson goes on this podcast, Jordan Peterson is going to talk about, he's going to muddy the waters and put out some fascist statements about like, well, maybe people shouldn't have that right, or maybe people shouldn't be, like, he's going to do it in a covert way that I don't know. I don't know that.
I don't think he doesn't deserve a platform just because I don't agree with his politics. I think that's a bit much.
Does he deserve to? No, but let's put it like this. If I had like a show and it was broadcast to millions of people and we agree that Joe Rogan pretty much shares our politics. Like, he's a Bernie guy. Joe Rogan's a good guy. Yeah, I believe that. I want to make that very clear. He seems like a good guy. from my limited interactions as a person who's never met the guy, he seems like a good guy. Yeah. I don't think I think he's even said he doesn't agree with George Peterson's politics. I'd have to look at it.
To me, that's a
Put that guy on your platform.
Because that's the whole idea. I don't agree with a lot of what you're saying. You're here. Should I not have you on because I don't agree with you? That's crazy. I agree with most of what you said.
You're right. Okay, you should talk to people you disagree with.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But if it's harmful, if certain speech is crossing...
What does Jordan Peterson say?
What crosses the line? What?
Well, do you have a specific example of what Jordan Peterson said that's harmful? Because I
listened to the guy forever.
Then that's not a good example. Because I listened to a lot of him, and I can tell you most of what he says is about psychology and philosophy. People just make clips of him saying one or two things about politics, and the majority of his conversation is about... I'm literally reading his book, 12 Rules for Life, right now. And
he should shut up about politics, because the majority of people, I would say, think that he's tied to fascism in some way.
Can you describe fascism?
Yeah.
We could break that down.
Fascism is a political system wherein it's the state, meaning the government, has absolute power. It's run by an autocratic, like a dictator, an autocratic figure. Civil liberties are null and void. And so basically a fascist system of government involves one person at the top, or maybe a very small group of people at the top. There's no democracy, meaning no voting, and civil rights, liberties. Usually it has a very strong basis in tradition, and typically it's tied to an old style of values that often is xenophobic. And in practice, it's always led to racism and some form of ethnic cleansing.
And what in the hell does Jordan Peterson have to do with any of that? He has conservative values, but I can't see him tied to a dictatorship or anything like that. I mean, I just can't. I don't see the connection.
He's got a few issues. Jordan Peterson, so he has these things where he'll selectively misspeak, and he'll be like, dog whistles is really his big thing. Like, he'll say something, he'll use terms like, well, the thing with the Fourth Reich, I mean the Third Reich, which was a dog whistle to people who want the Nazis to come back. And whether he needs to do it or not, there were a lot of alt-right people that latch on to that. But I think he's a smart guy. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. And so he'll say things like, oh, well, the thing about the Third Reich, he'll say things, he supports autocratic people, and he'll defend. Oh, there was that speech I'm reading. What did he say? He talked about Vladimir Putin not being so bad. He talked about...
No, that's totally... If you grasp that, you took it out of context, because he was a big studier of Nietzsche. Do you know who the philosopher Nietzsche? He has a book called Beyond Good and Evil. So Jordan Peterson's philosophy, and this is why I like the philosophy is that evil exists within all people. He's not saying Vladimir Putin is a good guy. He's just saying that from a philosophical and psychological perspective, he's saying that capacity for evil exists within every one of us. I don't think he's supporting.
He talks about I know he's talking about the duality of man.
Yeah.
And yes, and I've heard him say that about Hitler as well.
Yes. He studied Hitler as a point to understand good and evil within man, not because he likes Hitler. As a matter of fact, I can pull out chapters right now of him. Absolutely.
Talk about the good in Hitler?
No, he's not talking about the good in Hitler. He's talking about the bad in Hitler and how that bad exists within all men. That's what he's talking about.
See how people could take that as a humanization of a monster?
No, I'm reading the book right now and I didn't get that all.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying, see how other people could take that as a humanization of a monster. To say, well, he's not so different than you guys. Look at this guy.
That doesn't mean that stuff needs to exist for the people who want to discover those ideas. And now this is where we disagree about censorship and responsibility, because it's like, I'm gaining a lot from that.
I don't think because take him down. We are agreed on censorship. I don't think the government should have a role in that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Joe Rogan does have him on his thing. I think he needs to hit him a lot harder with critiques and criticism.
Yeah.
Open for a debate, but I think he just kind of lets him say a lot of things, and then doesn't really refute him back and forth that much. I also just disagree with pretty much everything he says, as far as like he's talked about social his thoughts on social programs like universal healthcare. He's against that. He's pretty sure he's open to the discussion on global warming when he is far too smart to actually believe global warming isn't real. And I think he would even say that. He says, no, he believes global climate change is real. He believes there should be discussion on it still, to which I'm like, why? The scientists aren't even discussing it anymore.
I agree with you on that. I don't believe his perspective on global warming. Like, I don't believe his perspective on global warming. But again, I'm not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say that he doesn't deserve a voice. I just think that's silly.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying that people should like put a dark hood on him and take him away. I'm saying that if I was Joe Rogan, I would at least prepare more for a speech. If I prepare more for knowing, okay, this person knows I'm giving him Spotify's largest microphone at the time at the podcast, say of Spotify. I should come to bat a bit more. Maybe I should have Jamie ready with like 50 thing quotes and be like, Jamie, roll that clip where you said global warming. Can we talk about that? Why do you actually believe that? Do you really believe that?
By the way, he does do that, though. I've seen him interview Jordan Peterson, and he does say, like, Jamie, pull that up. I don't know if he does challenge Jordan Peterson. As a matter of fact, not many people challenge him because Jordan Peterson is intimidating. He's very intelligent. Like him or not, he's very intelligent. I think he intimidates a lot of people for that reason. I think he did have a public debate.
Yeah, he did haircut for a while.
I think he had a public debate with, I don't know if you know this, I actually like this person. He's on the far left. Destiny. Have you ever heard of Destiny?
Yeah.
He's like a gamer, but he does like public debates with conservatives and stuff like that. And he's on the far left. He's a Bernie supporter, etc. He did that style of interview with Jordan Peterson where you should watch it. It's Destiny and Jordan Peterson. He straight up challenged Jordan Peterson. Not many people do that to him just because he's so intelligent and intimidating. But Joe Rogan absolutely challenges him. I've heard plenty of times he has.
Good.
Yeah. But anyways.
Again, Joe Rogan's not I don't have him in my bullseye.
Yeah. But we could keep talking about that. I think we just don't agree on some things there. Can you explain to me now, educate me, teach me.
Okay.
What did Donald Trump say to incite, not an erection, an insurrection on January 6th? Because I only know hearsay. I don't know actually what those tweets said.
You didn't watch the news that day?
No, I didn't. I wasn't into politics at that time.
So, Donald Trump, he was holding a big campaign rally. So the first thing he did, I don't even know if this is fair to say the first thing, but a major thing he did was he called into question the 2020 election. He said, oh no, they stole it. The mail-in ballots, blah, blah, blah. It's been refuted in every court in this country. It's been refuted by every fact checker possible. The election was fair and free. The 2020 election, he lost it. He lost it by millions of pocketbook votes.
Yeah.
And he lost it by very slim but necessary electoral votes. He still tried to foment, and he did it before. He did it leading up. He said, because he knew that his supporters, because he told them don't vote by mail, he knew his supporters weren't going to vote by mail. So as the mail-in ballots came in over the next coming days and possibly weeks even, it was going to tip in favor of Joe Biden just because people were still counting the votes. If they were postmarked before Election Day, they're valid. Now, he said, oh, it's going to be rigged. They're going to rig it. So he created that doubt in the American. This is what I'm talking about, amplifying voices that don't need voices. He created a doubt where there was no doubt in the American public before then. That's extremely dangerous. People in this country pretty much like democracy, even if we may have different ideas of that. People like the term of freedom is more so what I mean. And so that he held this Stop the Steal rally, this giant Stop the Steal rally. And he persuaded Mike Pence, who was going to have to certify the election results. He said, Mike Pence, you need to sway this election for me. Don't ratify Joe Biden as the president, because January 6th was when Joe Biden was going to be, it wasn't his inauguration, he was going to be sworn in, but it was when he was going to be ratified as he was the electoral winner. He is going to become the next president of the United States. He would already won the election. It was more so, this was procedure. It's procedural. That's the craziest thing about it. So he held this giant rally across from the Capitol where all the senators and Congress people were inside those buildings. So again, we talked about the ways our government works. He had all of these elected, he didn't happen there. He had a rally outside all of these elected leaders were already, you can make all of our laws and pretty much
the most important people in this country legislatively were surrounded by an angry mob who broke windows, stormed the Capitol. Know what was his role in this? He didn't tell them not to do it. And he even said, this is why I don't want to say it, because I don't remember his exact wording, which is why I'm pulling out my phone right now. But he was giving speeches where he was saying, it's going to be wild, it's going to be wild. They were chanting, hang Mike Pence in front of him. And he didn't say, oh, stop that. And then they broke into the room where, like, the building where Mike Pence was to hang Mike Pence. What did he do? He decided, you know what, Mike Pence is not going to be my next vice president. He just avowed Mike Pence because, yeah, he said, oh, here we go. He said, I'll be there. It'll be wild leading up to this event.
Wait, but he said that in response to, he said, I'll be there. It will be wild. In response to what? He just tweeted that?
About his Stop the Steal rally that he was going to have outside of the Capitol building.
And what is that? What is
it'll be wild.
What is Stop to Steal?
Stop the Steal means he thought that I guess Joe Biden had stolen the election. He was trying to stop the stealing of the election. So Stop the Steal was what they called the rallies.
Okay, it will be wild is inciting an insurrection, or is there more?
Yeah, there's a lot more. Patriot, here is that he said.
Okay.
He said, all patriots should descend on Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, January 6, 2021. I will be there, bullhorns on fire, to let the swamp dwellers know, not let them steal our country from us. I hope you can join me. And then he led the march until he saw how violent it was. He led the march there. And then he never said, that's the part he disputes, because he did say stop after it was already done. But later on, hours go by. He doesn't say, you guys should be breaking those windows. He had a microphone.
But, okay.
He's just there, and he said, let's go, until he realized he was going to be impeached for this and probably thrown in jail.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but how do we not know that his...
On camera.
No, that's not what I'm asking. How do we know that his insightful words were not just to incite, like, screaming and rallying and not actual? Like, how do we know that he wasn't just trying to incite people going, like, and scream and get excited? Like, where does it say we're going to break in? You know, like, how can we prove this? And this is where the definitions get a little murky. Now, you know a lot more about this than I do. I'm just basing this off of my first time really hearing this. But again, my question is, like, how do we have evidence that his words were intended to say break in,
I think,
as opposed to just be passionate?
I think there's context, because we have to keep in mind a few things here. One, he was president of the United States at the time. The NDI was giving him many reports daily saying, hey, there are large violent paramilitary groups that want to come on January 6th. He took that information and tweeted, come January 6th, we will stop and we'll take our country.
Wait, say the first part again, like what he said before.
So paramilitary means like a militia armed, like not the United States military, but alternative military groups.
Okay.
Think like the KKK, but more modern.
Okay.
And armed is really the thing to take away from that. So people with guns, weapons, pitchforks, were going to come to DC. There were threats of violence already. Instead of saying, chill, be cool, he took that information and said, hey, everybody, come to DC. We're going to meet outside them, pressure them. And his exact words again were, we're going to take our country back and show these swamp dwellers. Keep in mind, these are his members of his own party, half of them.
Okay.
We're going to show these swamp dwellers they cannot steal our country. So he had a microphone. He had people with fire and pitchforks and guns standing outside him. And, okay, they started chanting, hang Mike Pence, his vice president. They started chanting, kill Nancy Pelosi. They said, we're going to go over here, who was Speaker of the House at that time. And this, very famous congresswoman. We need to drain the swamp, do this. And you can see it was increasingly getting violent. Again, there were people there wearing bulletproof vests with face masks. I can't remember.
So you're saying enough time had gone by that he should have said, whoa, this was not what I intended? Like, there was plenty of time.
He's the president. It's not like you and I. He has the entire forces of the U.S. military at his command at all moments. He had Secret Service there. He had the D.C. police force. He had, again, in theory, the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI. All the FBI I can speak to was advising him, hey, this is going to be really bad. You should not do this. And what did he do? he ignored all of that. Did he ever call the National Guard and said, whoa, they broke into the Capitol building. People are taking craps on the Speaker of the House is dead. No, he let it happen because he said, go. He started marching with them towards the Capitol. Once he saw them break in, and he wasn't ever engaged himself, but once he saw them break in, he was like, oh, this might turn ugly. He left. He didn't say stop. He didn't say disperse.
Yeah.
He just let them happen because at his core, I believe he wanted the congressional leaders of our country to be murdered, because if those people are murdered, people realize if they actually did break in, kidnap these people or murder them, that's our legislative branch. You cannot have an election in every single state in every single branch at the same time if it will prioritization.
Yeah.
Donald Trump would have effectively become a king at that moment. He already appointed majority of justices at that time, so the courts would have backed him. He would have no opposition. He would have basically dissolved the parliament or dissolved Congress and would de facto been a king. Where king usually implies like blood relation to the next ruler, so it would have been more of a dictator.
Yeah.
He would have been the only person allowed to make laws at that point.
Yeah.
And the one he even still says his thing right now. He says that the crime was that MAGA people were thrown in jail for breaking into the office. He says it's a shame that he doesn't care about the Capitol Police members who were killed. He cares about. He said, "Oh, one of the rioters, the person who stuck their head in, a Secret Service member shot them in the face because they were trying to come in and kill the legislative branch." And that's what he has an issue with. His rhetoric on this has always been very consistent. Prior to that thing, he also said, and this I do remember very clearly, I'm going to use the term paramilitary again, paramilitary group, which again just means the military that is not the United States military, an alternate military that exists within our country, unelected, the Proud Boys. He told them, stand back and stand by. That doesn't mean, he says, we'll see what happens. I need you guys to I need Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. To me, the stand back and the stand by part is the damning part. The Proud Boys are an openly racist, fascist group. They are like what the modern forms of BKKK.
Yeah.
He should have said, I denounce them and all things. I don't like that these people support me. It makes me sick to my stomach. Instead, he said, stand back and stand by. We'll see if we need. He said, stand back and stand by, which means we'll see if we need you. And then, Proud Boys were there on January 6th. I mean, you guys see some of these videos. It's the most alarming things. I mean, there's people swinging. Did you ever go to DC for a class field trip?
Oh, a long time ago. Too long ago to remember it.
Well, it's like, if you have any memories of that, when you look at these videos, it's like insane to see people swinging like flag spears and to see people, again, with the zip ties and the body armor, like but basically like a museum or it's hallowed ground to a lot of people. And we came. The biggest crime in American people's mind is thinking we're exceptional. The worst thing that ever happened is that we think, oh, Americans are exceptional. It can't happen here. Everything can happen here, and it can happen really fast. We came so close to having our government overthrown by a fascist coup. And I want to say that, okay, the governors of every state would have banded together and ousted Trump, and it should not have to get to that. We shouldn't have to have a civil war. You shouldn't have to call into question the legitimacy of a president. The greatest thing Washington ever did, George Washington, was when he abdicated, when he said, he relinquished power and said, I will not seek a third term because we are a country of presidents, not kings. He said, power needs to be transferred peacefully. And up until, so from 1789, I think his farewell address, up until 2021, we have had a peaceful transfer of power from every president. We are one of the first countries to have that happen. England have beat us. They had peaceful transfers of power before us, but it's a very unique thing. In the 20th century, it's really when most countries stopped having kings. People had kings until World War I. I did. And
No, it's okay. Okay, well, based on everything you told me, I would agree with you there. I think that's not appropriate behavior for a president to say on Twitter. However, that doesn't necessarily persuade in the things I said prior. I still think that this might be an extreme example of like, okay, well, yeah, you shouldn't talk about this on a public platform if it's going to incite. And I did see an erection at the White House, that giant erection tent.
Yeah. What? Full circle. That's the Washington Monument.
Yeah. So I do remember an erection being incited. But based on what you just told me, I agree with you there. So we're in agreement with that. I didn't know all that because like I said, I literally was just kind of following how I was raised politically, and I didn't pay much attention. I was more interested in other things. I didn't care as much. So we agree with that. But I still think that doesn't necessarily change my concerns about the stuff I said prior. And
yeah.
where do you draw? I guess where we draw the line of extreme versus not. Now, this I would have to agree with you is extreme. Some of the other things mentioned, like Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan's episodes, to me, that's not this level of extremity that needs to be censored.
I had to be a healthy disagreement there. Like I'm not, I'm not super married to like we're good there. I think.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm happy to disagree on that, but I'm also not like I think you've opened my eyes about certain things. I don't do more research on them.
Yeah. And I do love research. So that's one of the words that I've learned recently that can confuse people if you say doing research. When the average American person says doing research, they just mean like you said, taking a shit and reading it out loud, but and not like reading actual research papers. So,
which I don't intend to.
I think the correct term would just be read.
I'll read it.
Read articles.
I'll Google it.
It is a research. Reading articles is technically research. It's just that it's not necessarily a good research if you don't know what articles to look for.
I mean, that's something I have to grow as a person is I'm a bit of a snobby dick. Like I definitely need to be less particular about like things. And I say very disparaging things about people I think are dumber than me. So like, yeah, I definitely need to check myself on that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, I can't hear.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I always confuse people when I'm talking because like, I didn't mean, yeah.
You're
right.
No.
I meant, yeah, like that concludes that segment. That's what I meant. Yeah. Like doesn't.
Yeah.
I will say this. I'm going to follow up by saying this. I think no matter who wins this election, I am not hopeful about the civil response. I think there might be civil discourse. So I think if Kamala, I don't know if I'm properly saying it, is it Kamala or Kamala?
Kamala.
I think if Kamala wins, the Trump fans are going to be pissed off and try to kill him. I think if Trump wins...
him or her?
Her. Wait. Him. No, I messed this all up. I'm mixing sides. If Kamala wins, the Trump people might incite another insurrection. I think if Kamala wins, people are going to try to kill Trump. My prediction is that no matter who wins, it's going to be chaos either way.
Yeah. Jesus, I can't believe. I'm pretty optimistic about this election. I hope I'm not jinxing it by saying that. But like, again, Trump's starting to be insurrection. The majority of the, I don't know. I guess some people wanted that to happen, but I'm pretty good about this. Like Trump has lost the last 3 elections this will be the 3rd election in a row he loses. He lost the last presidential election. No, he did lose. This will be so he lost the midterm election in 2018. He lost the 2020 presidential election, and then being his party lost the midterm elections in 2022. I don't think they're going to run him again if he loses. I think it's done. I think Trumpism can possibly die right now, next month. It could be the end. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be super like dark. I hope that nothing happened. I hope it's just a nice piece of transfer of power. But yeah, maybe I'll stay home. Maybe you call in sick.
Okay, I will say this, and we might disagree on this. There is a lot of rhetoric that if he wins, democracy's over. And I'm like, we did win once, and I didn't have there wasn't this catastrophic fall of democracy, was there?
Kind of.
In what way?
So democracy itself, do we still have elections and they're free and fair? Yeah, that's intent. You're right.
Yeah.
Did he try and strike down as many things for the machinations of our society and government as he could have? He did. And we're going to keep seeing those unfold.
The only one that
the water.
The only one that like stood out to me was the Roe v. Wade one. That one, I'm like, all right, that was fucked up. But besides that, I don't know what they're talking about.
That's kind of the main thing is he got to install these judges, which really don't have any care for the American people or law in that. Well, their interpretation of the rule of law is whatever Trump wants. So yeah, Roe v. Wade, that's a pretty huge thing for our fabric of our society. The Chevron thing though, the Chevron doctrine, which happened at like the same time, it was a little bit later, but the Chevron doctrine, horrifically damning, which basically will, or the overall Chevron doctrine will state that companies do not have to listen to something like the EPA. Essentially, if Nestle was to come and poison our water in order because it's cheaper, or if an oil company decides, oh, you know what, we'll have to do these safety things, they can get away with that now. Like, they don't have to follow the same authority, as I understand it, that they had to from these government agencies. Government agencies cannot create rules, is more so what it is. So the Food and Drug Administration is like one of the biggest ones for this. Food and Drug Administration essentially says, we can't put poison in our food. Why does that exist? Because companies, before it existed, in the 20th century, so not even that long ago, ruled that, oh, wait a minute, poison's cheaper than good products. Like, there was that book Upton Sinclair wrote, The Jungle, all about how like there was rat feces in meat packing in New York City when you did that thing. Yeah. It's cheaper to not care about, like, companies just care about profit. That's what corporations entirely for. That's why we have to regulate them. If we don't have those regulations, they are going to poison our water and our food, and they're not going to do it because they want to kill us. They'll do it because they don't care.
I do have a question. What would be Donald, and then this isn't like a question to incite like an insurrection. This is a question to just like ask because I don't know. What, I was being sarcastic. What is his incentive to try to make abortion illegal? Because I have a hard time believing that he's so Christian that he cares. Like, I feel like he would probably get an abortion if he had, like, if he impregnated a porn star, he'd probably get. So what would be if we break that down, what would be his incentive to do that? Is it because the people following him want him to, and he just wants to please them? Is that what it is?
That's what I think. Donald Trump is not a Christian. Donald Trump is not a Christian at all. And I think his followers know that too, except maybe the really zealous ones. But like, Donald Trump was pro-choice until like 2012 or something like that, until he ran for president. Yeah. He would like those interviews of him in 2005 saying he's pro-choice.
Yeah.
Like, he just wants to win, and he knows that. He was also a Democrat, like, for in 2000. Like, it's just crazy.
So I actually have a point to make about that.
Belief system.
Because he was a Democrat, I have come to notice as of recently that some politicians will flip-flop sides. So that kind of opened my mind to the idea that maybe it doesn't, like, maybe less matters, and not less matters. I'm trying to articulate myself. Whatever corruption existed on the right.
Yeah.
How do we know those billionaires didn't just flip flop to the left at one point? So that's where like I keep my mind open, where I'm just like, just because you're revealing all this terrible stuff about Donald Trump with them, which I'm in agreement with you, how do I know that some of these same corrupt people didn't just dump their money in the left, and now there's corruption in the left as well? That's where I like raise my hands, and I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Well, I don't want you to do that, but like, all right. So let's broaden the terms a bit then. Okay. Yeah. Maybe this will be helpful. There's the left, there's the right. You can use those terms.
Yeah.
But then we can also separate them from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Because I would say that of the left wing, right wing axes, you can use that to mean, and some people even like to make it more about up and down and left to right. Let's just, for keeping it left to right, let's say on the left is closer to left-wing social and political ideologies. So left-wing is more pro-democratic democracy, so voting, and usually more towards community, social programs, socialism, stuff like that. And then the right is more towards autocracy, which is one person rules everything. So the antithesis of democracy. Democracy is what is Greek for demos kratos, the people rule. Autocracy is one rule. One rule.
Yeah, but it's not called the autocracy. It's called the Republican. So,
Well, as I'm saying, we have to separate these terms.
okay.
Where republic is, republic is the Roman term for our republic is we live in a republic. A republic is a type of democracy. It's easier if we don't think of them as Republican Democrat and more as like team one, team B, because neither the Republicans nor the Democrats traditionally and politically, like the actual people who make up the leadership of those parties, they're both pretty center right-wing parties. Like I always say, Kamala Harris is much, and so is Joe Biden, much more right-wing than I am. And I think more than a lot of the American people are. Like there's several issues that right-wing and left-wing people agree on, but the politics don't. Like everyone wants drugs to be legal, like weed. Everyone wants, the majority of the country actually is pro-choice, whether personal in their lives or not, the majority of the people.
That's where I'm so confused about that, because I'm like, I'm definitely pro-choice, 100%.
Yeah.
And I said this, you didn't hear this podcast. I'm not saying that women should be getting 10, 20 abortions and they should be using it like popping the pill. I'm not saying that. There should be some accountability and responsibility. But to make something like that illegal is absolutely fucking crazy to me. Because, for example, we were talking about this earlier. I had a mild sexual, if you want to call it that. I had a mild sexual assault where I was not harmed in any way, but it was a scary situation. Now, abortion is legal in Pennsylvania. If I had a catastrophic sexual assault happen to me and I got pregnant and the abortion was illegal, you're telling me how the fuck I would have to carry the baby of somebody who assaulted me?
It's like, it's horrific.
So there's no, and I also want to make that clear in the beginning when I said I'm confused with the election. That doesn't mean like I agree with any of that. I guess where I'm saying is like, I'm starting to lose faith that if we're talking about, what was the word you said? Autocratic?
Autocracy.
Autocracy. I think that these teams are pulling the wool all over. They're fooling us. I think that autocracy, in some sense, probably exists within both parties. I think probably we're getting this public image that it's only the right that has this autocracy, but really the left is probably run by certain billionaires. And again, I don't have evidence of that.
We're in agreement. Let me break this down.
You were trying to say that there's a difference between the left and the
Democrats.
Yes.
That's basically what I'm saying. And the rights and Republicans, even though I think they're closer aligned. I'm trying to say that we need to set, and I think, okay, let's just draw these 6 divisions. I'll try to get through it quick. There's a difference between Democrats and left wing, and there's a difference between Democratic voters and Democratic politicians. Yeah. And the same way there's a difference between Republican voters and Republican politicians, and there's a difference between Republicans and right-wing people, in theory. Now, in practice too, because there's a lot of libertarian people who, again, pro-choice, really everything socially. They're pro-gay rights. They don't care about the Christian bullshit. They don't care about their racism or anything that the Republican Party has pushed for like past 50 years or whatever. They just don't like, whatever libertarians believe. I don't know. They think taxes are bad and they don't want to give money to roads, schools, or hospitals. But those people, while they might like suppose the weed or whatever, they're socially liberal, do vote Republican. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is there's different things. There's the people and there's the party, and then there's the party leadership. And we need to distinguish those in our heads. Most people are center to center left, I'd say, in this country. The parties, and no, there's people who are very far right, far left, and there's people who are very center right.
Yeah.
But most people traditionally, up until really Trumpism, but even still now, are center in their mindset. But the parties, people like to say the parties have moved to their extremes. That's not true. The Democratic Party, if anything, looking at Kamala Harris's campaign, is only getting more right wing. Looking at Barack.
Yeah, that's true. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
that's true.
And that's been the case my entire life. Bill Clinton was more right wing than Jimmy Carter.
But I think the reason that's happening is because they're trying to get the attention of the people in the set, like the people who are not. Because here's the thing, they're they're fighting against Donald Trump's fans. So in order to win their attention, they might have more of a chance of sway. I think that's why they chose, what's his face? The vice president.
JD Vance.
No, not JD Vance.
Oh, Tim Kaine. Tim
Waltz. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the reason they chose Tim Waltz, like this gunslinging like type of guy, is because I have no hate on it. I think it's smart. I think
he's great.
Yeah.
I think it's smart, but very cynical. And I think it is very powerful because there's this thing called the Overton window, which is basically what I'm talking about. Where most people will stay toward the center, but the problem is they'll stay towards the center regardless of what that center is. So when you have an extreme figure like Donald Trump or George W. Bush, Sarah Palin, Ronald Reagan, who moves so far to the right, if the Democrats want to stay in the center, that means the center moves towards the right. So the center gradually is moving towards the right over the last 40 years. That's why things like immigration, they didn't even try and talk about education.
Which is, I don't want to harp on it, but that's why I think the censorship thing was a mistake, because you took people with far left ideas and pushed them towards the right because of that. I think it was like, even if we're just speaking if we're not even talking about what's morally correct versus vaccines, if we're talking dirty politics, it was a bad chess move, because you have all these people who are center left now feel insulted and are becoming center right. I just think it was a dumb chess move.
Those people were manipulated too, though. Like the whole, there's the new age to Trump pipeline. What they call it, crystals to...
I actually
talking about this.
We talked about this, and I didn't have a good answer, but I thought about it since that episode. You asked me why.
You're just hanging out casually.
No, it was a podcast. It was a podcast. So your question to me was, why did all the spiritual people, like all the crystal, and I have some of my crystal. Listen, I'm a spiritual bitch too.
Yo, I love yoga, dude.
Yeah, I like to pray. A lot of the spiritual crystal, white girl, yoga pants type people, and guys I don't want to stare. Crystal to QAnon. The reason that slip happened, that slow slip into QAnon happened, I think has to do with the vaccines and censorship. Because these bitches, I don't say these bitches, because I'm kind of one of them. I'm not a QAnoner, but
I think I'm a bitch in a bad way.
No, these bitches, they believe that you can cure everything with kale chips. So if you're telling them to take this, they've been told for the longest time to stop taking Tylenol, and they believe this. So you're telling them to take this vaccine or else. Bad mistake. That's what I'm saying. It's
they have to take it, otherwise we are.
I'm separating the moral thing with the politically dirty thing. If we're talking the politically dirty thing, if there was any politically dirty incentive to push people a certain way, a lot of people from the left got pushed to.
Well, during the first hour of this, because I'm sure this is still long.
Yeah.
During the first hour, I said to you, are all fears justified? Or do all fears deserve? And I think that the crystally new agey spiritual people have I think that they have a very wonderful curiosity about things in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that they have very healthy skepticism, but I would argue it's flipped to becoming an unhealthy skepticism during that time.
Yeah.
And that's where you have, because I think you can be too open-minded. I do. Where, that's where you do then going to, I would go through, you could be on a plane and see, the earth is curved, obviously. Yeah. But there are a lot of very intelligent people, I think, otherwise intelligent people who will look at that, who just dismiss that and say, oh, well, it's because we're in this ice dome or whatever. Or they're people can suspend their rational thought. Hell, think about every friend you've ever had who's been in an abusive relationship. People can suspend rational thought when it's convenient for them to do so, or when it's inconvenient to not do so.
Yeah.
And to an extent, we all do that. But I don't know. I think that they were just prey. And I think that QAnon people, the right wing, saw them as, hey, these people are super skeptical. They already don't trust the government for rightful reasons. Let's make them distrust the government for the wrong reason.
Now, I'll say this. I'm open to the possibility that some people on the right are manipulating me. I'm open to the idea that they're saying, you're pissed about that Joe Rogan incident? Come here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we got to go somewhere. They're not accepting us in the left. So it's like, where are we going to go? You know? So it's like, so that's why I think the left made a mistake. And I think if they just pulled back on that issue, a lot of these people who got scared off to the left would probably come back.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the whole other, is the left and the right even real? Because it's like what we were just talking about, that
There is no left-wing party in this country. There hasn't been in my life.
yeah, like, is the Democratic Party even real? Like
Yes, it's a real.
but I mean, is it really full of compassionate people that care about left issues?
That's why I say you got to make the separation. There's left-wing politics, okay, and there's Democratic voters versus Democratic politicians. Other than like Bernie and AOC and a handful of others, the bulk of the people, and it comes from an earlier thing we said in this podcast, which is like the majority of people in this country are working people who work for a living and sell their time for money. Usually not that much of it, money-wise.
Yeah.
The majority of our political class in this country, the oligarchy, if you will, are not working people who grew up working. They're people born into extreme wealth.
Not to interrupt, but to understand, the oligarchy is not one dictator, but an elite class of people that it's almost like a group of dictators and okay, yeah.
Plutocracy. I would even say an autocracy. Plutocracy is, I guess, the other term for that. So it's either replacing our Greek or Latin. But like, oligarchy is like a government of a small, concentrated elite group of people, which I still would say is autocratic in that it's one ruler, but technically plutocratic should be that it's a very small concentration of rulers. I hope your listeners are not annoyed.
Yeah, I have to say, we said in the beginning of the podcast that we were going to talk about goofy stuff, but I think we're going to have to save that for another time because it's going to be really random if I'm just like, oh, let me tell you about my bad Tinder date. Like, right.
What's funny is that you were like text almost every day. We only talked about music and goofy stuff.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is like, I actually don't like, after this podcast, I don't think we disagree about much. It's just this one particular part of the issue that you might disagree about, but I don't disagree about the Donald Trump stuff.
I'll say this also. I think I came at you too hot in that text.
Oh, that was nasty.
I felt so bad. I apologize then.
And I think you're wrong. I'm going to call him out on this. He said that I didn't understand.
Keep that.
He said I didn't. Well, I understand what you were trying to say. I just said we were too feisty.
The term of freedom of speech. I said, I don't know if I want to read it.
Okay, we won't read it. Okay, you spoke out of passion, but in a nutshell, you said I was misusing the term freedom of speech. I don't think I was. I think that, again, my definition of freedom of, first of all, I want to reiterate that I never said a breach to the Constitution. I never used that language.
Which is how the only way that I look at freedom of speech is on the Constitution, which is why we're in agreement that we're just looking at different terms here.
Yeah. But even with that said, I still think the definitions are murky on what counts as freedom of speech when a lot of life is going online. And I would actually make the argument that it's quite a conservative way to treat it, to say it's in the book like this. It's like, no, we're evolving into an online society. So
agree that I am often dismissive, and I cannot mean I am trying to grow.
All I have to do is tell you you're being conservative, and then I'll change your mind.
I don't.
It is. I mean, it is.
Yeah,
my dad was the one who pointed this out to me because we were talking about, I was saying something about how the right is really stingy about the which number amendment is the guns one? Is that the second? Second. I was talking to my dad and I said, the right is so stingy about that damn Second Amendment. Why can't they evolve it a little bit? And my dad said, in their defense, either side would do that. If it benefited the left, they would do it too. It just happens to benefit the right. And he's on the left, like he's a Democrat, and he admitted that. So I'm just like, I think this is a case where that would count.
And this issue is another stupid issue because most of the country agrees, hey, don't let crazy people have guns.
I said this on my last podcast. I don't need a gun. I'm too crazy.
I heard that podcast.
I will, and I would not shoot up a school, but I would probably kill myself if I had a gun. You agree with that?
Probably kill yourself, yes.
So my mom should not have a gun. Like this is
not. I'll say this though: if you accidentally missed, or you thought there was a possibility that the bullet goes through the wall and hitting a random person in the other room, I'm saying that only to dissuade you from ever even thinking that. You would feel so guilty.
Yeah,
you would kill yourself again.
I would like a taser though for self-defense. I don't know if that's inappropriate, but I wouldn't mind having a taser. I'm not going to kill myself with a taser. But like if I get sexually assaulted in the street, that would like to tase a bitch. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, tasing's cool. Tasing doesn't hurt people. Tasing isn't like if you're drunk and you have a taser, or if you catch this spouse with someone else and you have a taser, guess what? You all laugh about it in a few days. I don't know. It's not final. You lose your job, get drunk, someone accidentally will take you the wrong way, you tase them, you giggle later. Like I don't have a taser, obviously, but like, yeah, I think non-lethal deterrents are what our country needs to invest in. Deterrence. I think that people walking around with non-lethal weaponry, I like a taser or a mace. I don't have much of an issue with that, if any issue.
I guess the only issue is that, teenagers would be tasing each other all the time.
Of course. And you know what? There's rednecks in Hillsborough that shoot each other. That's maybe we'll talk about the soft pod, but we asked some people who have accidentally shot themselves, like rednecks in Zion down.
For real?
Yeah. Because they're like, we'll talk about that off pod because we know the people.
Oh, but, okay. So we don't talk about it on pod.
Yeah, we can't talk about it on pod, but it is a thing where because if you have a gun, you're going to use it. I don't care what anyone says. Well, no, some people are really responsible. Okay, so that's why you need to have responsible gun ownership. I take that back. You're responsible, you probably aren't going to use it. But if you're, I don't know, these kids, they were maybe 19 and they were just playing around with their dad's guns or their guns, I don't know. And it was in my grade, and he shot his brother in the chest. And I'm like, holy crap, they're all alive and stuff. And he shot his brother in the chest with a shotgun. And that's gonna.
You could also make the argument, it's like the drug argument. You could also make.
Oh, that's right.
No, that's not what I'm saying. You could also make the gun argument. I've never heard this argument. I just thought of it right now. So I'm sure it's probably already exists. You could compare it to the drug argument. Yeah, we can make guns more restrictive or possibly illegal, but then there's going to be a black market of drug sales, and then that's going to be even worse because then you'll never know who bought a gun. So there's also that argument to be made too.
There's the argument. I'm not saying take away all the guns. I think at this point in our country that'd be really difficult. But what I think you can do is in the way to give people driver's licenses. I only give people, and some states do. That's why New Jersey doesn't have school shootings because it's hard to get a gun in New Jersey and the surrounding states. If it was as hard to get a gun in every part of the country where it's like, oh hey, do you have a history of mental illness? You check yes. It's like, Or maybe you have to get a psychological review. Be a psychiatrist. I think here's what I was. Get a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, to sign off and say this person is stable enough to have a gun. You should go through psychiatric review. You should have to do mandatory training that's periodic and re-ups. I don't think driving tests are really great. There's a lot of assholes in the room who can't drive.
Yeah.
One of them. A lot of people so I'm going to be fine driving for the rest of my life. I think that with guns, it's the same thing. Meanwhile, if you live in some states, you can just walk into a Walmart and that day you could walk out with an AR-15. You could walk out with a very dangerous gun. You shouldn't have to prove, hey, I have sound mind and I'm stable. Hell, even cops, they get cops stricter. You remember there's that thing in every cop show where it's turning your badge and gun because you did this thing. Why are we stricter with what cops get guns than we are over a John Henry person, It's so weird because random idiots in some cases, get to have more access to guns than trained people. I think you need extensive training and just re-up it, frequent psychological things. Then, yeah, sure, if you want a gun, you can do that. And you should also maybe have to submit to random spot checks. That's not much kill right now. Maybe people should be allowed to knock on your door randomly and say, hey, do you have a gun in here? Let me see it and check. Are you keeping it? Is the gun out? Because it's I see you have children. Let me make sure you don't just have the gun outside. Be sure it's in its case and locked. Unless, there's so many gun safety things we could probably do. Auditing sounds good. But I also came these off the top of my head just now. I know that there are very smart people who actually think about this stuff that have ideas that are just dead on the Senate floor. And that's the sad thing.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So we said, we said quite a bit today. And this podcast went a lot longer than I thought it would because I think you got here 11:30, 11:40. We've been going for at least 2 hours, that's for sure. So we'll do the fun and lighthearted podcast a different day. This was a serious podcast, but I'm glad we don't hate each other after this because you're the only person I know who can have my spare key and my will. I don't trust anybody else, at least in proximity to where it's reasonable. Obviously, I would give my sister my spare key, but she lives an hour and a half away from me, so that doesn't make much sense.
If I ever take another vacation in my life, you will get a text message with my door code.
So, mission accomplished. We disagreed on a few things, but still, I don't have access to guns. But if I had access to guns, no, I'm just kidding. It might be a different prediction.
If you had access to guns, you would not shoot me, is what you're saying.
I guess I do have access to guns, actually, because it's legal in Pennsylvania. I don't have a gun, but I have access.
Around here. Not in Philly, but in the rest of the state, yeah.
Also, okay, we're not going to go into side tangent, but just fast question. In Pennsylvania, you can open carry, but is that different in the city?
Yeah.
I think you could conceal carry in Pennsylvania, and I don't know about
Concealed carry. Well,
concealed carry. I'm sorry.
I've seen people open carry in Kensington. But
people are carrying in Philly. The question is, are they allowed to? Not if they are.
I don't know. I know that Philly laws are stricter than PA laws, but I don't know what that means really.
For the city.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it, guys. Pranzata Podcast, episode 134. If you enjoyed this episode, please chime in on anything we've talked about. What are some points that you agreed with or disagreed with for Matthew? And what are some points you agreed with or disagreed with for me, your host, Andrea Pranzatelli? And again, subscribe. It is my mission to be a full-time podcaster, and every subscriber helps me reach the goal. That's it. Have a good day, guys. Bye.